Hey everyone, Rho here. Before we begin today, for awareness there has been some scam commenter coming up in the comments below, pretending to be me on the last couple of uploads. Hopefully most people can tell a bot or a scammer when they see it, but to make it clear for everyone, I will never ever ask you to private message on some platform for a reward or anything like that whatsoever. So if you do see anything remotely like that, please flag and report the comment. Again, I will never ever ask for private messages in the comments implying rewards or anything remotely like that. Honestly, in my opinion, if I ever see anything like that on any social media platform, I always think it's likely to be a bot or a scam, and I think those are words to live by. Always better to be safe than sorry in the world of social media. However, with that out the way, on to today. And today we are talking Horus Lupercal. 3 aspects that represent the greatness of the Primarch that was lost. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Horus Lupercal, Primarch, Warmaster, Traitor. There is truly no character more iconic to the past of the heresy, and no character more definitive for the future that would follow. Horus's fall laid the foundation for the very setting of the 40k universe. The Warmaster's name is synonymous with betrayal, with the end of the dream, with chaos. Yet, as we near the end of the Siege of Terror, the ultimate climax decades in the making, I think it's worth reminding on just what Horus was, what the Imperium truly lost with his fall. Ever since that absolutely gorgeous new Horus model was revealed the other week, I've been thinking about the Warmaster a fair bit. How great it would be to see an equivalent of that in his prime. The Horus Lupercal of the Lunar Wolves. It all feels so long ago now, that the Horus that was gets harder and harder to remember. And for me, there's 3 particular moments from the Heresy series that stand out, as great examples of the different aspects of Horus as he was. The Primarch, the brother, and the man. Now the first, the Primarch, was the glory of Lupercal, the Horus who spent decades leading the Imperium across the stars by his father's side, showcasing why it was Horus who would go on to be placed as the first amongst the Primarchs. And for me, the real best example of this actually took place in the short story The Wolf of Ash and Fire by author Graham McNeill. We've spoken about this event before on the channel, and I think this is actually one of those absolute gem of a short stories, one that perhaps has been largely forgotten, which is a crying shame, as it's one of those truly rare glimpses where we get to see the Emperor and Horus's relationship undoubtedly in its prime. Here above the world of Goro, the Legion of the Lunar Wolves engaged the Orc Empire, and to all intents and purposes, it appeared they were losing. The Greenskin fleet was on the advantage, pressing ever deeper into the Imperial forces. Of course, this was all simply part of Horus's plan, and just at the vital moment, the reinforcements arrived, translating from the warp, encircling the Orc forces. Those reinforcements just happened to be the Emperor of Mankind's flagship, accompanied by his devastating fleet. And the Orcs just get absolutely eviscerated. Here we witness the Emperor and Horus Lupercal side by side, not referenced or seen from distance, up close and clear. We witness the truth of the relationship between the Emperor and his Primarch. As the Emperor boards the vengeful spirit with 300 of his custodies, it feels like a monumental event. The entire force of 10,000 lunar wolves aboard, forming up unordered, just to witness the moment. There's none of the coldness teased behind the Emperor's words that we so often get. There's none of the creator-tool dynamics hinted at beneath and between his words. This is simply the showcase of the Emperor and his chosen son. A time when the Crusade was in all its glory, really revealing why the heresy would go on to be so tragic. If there was one story you could read to give you a sense of that before the end of the siege, for me the Wolf of Ash and Fire is it, showcasing the Emperor and Horus's relationship in its prime. Yet that's not even the best of it, for after this reunion the assault on the planet's surface commences. The Lunar Wolves drop pods launching their planetary invasion, as the Emperor and Horus teleport straight down into the heart of the enemy forces. And there we got to witness Horus and the Emperor fighting side by side. Now there are several hundred Imperial forces around them, but there are thousands of orcs. And there's some absolutely immense descriptions of the Emperor's power in battle, literally taking on hundreds of orcs as they come at him, each swing of his sword like a bomb blast going off amongst their forces, psychic fire instantly destroying everything it touches. He's even disintegrating bullets as they come at him with his mind. It's undoubtedly right up there with his Master of Mankind moments for me. But the key for why this is such a definitive moment for Horus, as the Primarch he was, is not just because he's right there every inch of the way, following his father heedlessly into the numberless mass of orcs. It's because ultimately the Emperor becomes separated by some chasm opening up beneath him, and Horus, without even a split second's thought, just leaps down after him, finally finding his father surrounded and fighting a mass of orcs, each the size of a Primarch, one of which, no doubt the war boss, even larger, double the size of the Emperor himself. And Horus, now with his sword broken, his bolter out of ammo, just wades into them to save his father. Let me say that again. Horus, completely unarmed, witnessing his father surrounded by orcs the size of Primarchs, with a war boss easily double that, doesn't even think twice, and he charges into them, ultimately saving his father's life. It's an absolutely epic moment, and for me truly the best example of Horus as the Emperor's Primarch he was, not only because he was willing to risk it all to save the Emperor, but also because he was good enough to do it. Horus's name gets left out of a lot of conversations when it comes to the greatness of his brothers, and I can't help but feel a lot of this is because he spends much of the heresy as the villain on the sidelines. However, the Lupercal that was should absolutely always be included in the greatest Primarch debates. The Lupercal of old was an absolute beast. We just haven't necessarily been able to see enough of it, but the Wolf of Ash and Fire is most definitely one of, if not the best example. Now, the aspect of the brother. I think there's actually a fair few examples that stand out for me here, representing the depths of the brother who was lost. But if I had to name just one, I would say the best example of this comes from the heresy novel Fear to Tread, Sanguinius and the Blood Angels' entry into the heresy series, and this was by author James Swallow. Here the Blood Angels and the Lunar Wolves have been operating on campaign together, successfully conquering the world of Melchior. However, as Sanguinius and Horus celebrate in its aftermath, Sanguinius is called away by his legion on a private emergency, one that even Horus can't be told about. And as it turns out, because a Blood Angel has been lost, to the Red first. Now Sanguinius goes on to find this lost son, and after trying and failing to bring him back from the madness, sorrowfully executes him. But Horus, concerned by Sanguinius's reaction when he was called away, had secretly followed him, revealing himself after witnessing Sanguinius's execution. Now, okay, I hear you. Following a brother secretly isn't exactly the sign of what you would call a good brother. And there's a definite argument there, I won't deny it. However, it's what transpires after this that really strikes me. Horus is really shocked by witnessing this, genuinely stricken at what he's just witnessed. Sanguinius killing one of his own sons. And so Horus asks him, "What did you do?" disbelieving what his eyes are telling him. And Sanguinius equally is shocked to know Horus has witnessed this, having his biggest, darkest secret revealed. And in an era of legionaries against legionaries, it's easy to overlook how big an issue this was. How unbelievable this would have been to Horus. But in the days of the Crusade, this was a very big thing. Even more so for a Primarch to be seen executing one of his own sons. Especially from one such as Sanguinius. This isn't Angron we're talking about here. This is the Angel. Horus is so bewildered he even begins to ask if it's some curse of the Xenos. Some manipulation of his legion that forced Sanguinius to take this action. And for a moment, Sanguinius is actually tempted to lie, to use this excuse as a reason to hide the truth, to keep his flaw hidden. But ultimately he decides to reveal the truth, informing his brother that no, the blame lies with him. And it's in this moment that Horus proves why he was so loved by most of his brothers. At last Horus stood and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder, the stony lines of his face etched in disquiet. "If you wish it, I will leave this place now and never speak again of the matter. Your legion is your concern, Sanguinius. I would never question that." He paused. "But I am your brother, and your friend, and it cuts me to see the sorrow in your eyes. I know you are a compassionate soul, that you would not do such a thing unless it was your only choice, but you have a great burden, and I would help you carry it, if only you will let me." Horus offered to walk away from this and never mention it again, despite his shock, despite his confusion, despite his disgust. He was willing to put it all aside for his brother Sanguinius. And I'm sure many would doubt the sincerity in Horus's actions here, but to that I can only say I wholeheartedly believe him. As much as I despise the war master he would later become, the Horus Lupercal of old really was a true brother to his fellow Primarchs. And that second part too, the offer of helping to carry his burden, Again here, it's a truth that bearing some form of emotional burden does take its toll. It does wear you down emotionally and mentally. Even a Primarch wouldn't be immune to that on some level. Sanguinius sharing this would absolutely help him feel that figurative weight lighten off of his shoulders. And yet for all the promise of that offer, it's not all. For in Horus stating he will keep Sanguinius's confidence, the angel asks him, "Even from our father?" The other Primarch said nothing for a moment. Then, at last, he nodded. Horus agrees to keep it a secret, even from their father. That's a monumental request by Sanguinius. For any Primarch, but especially so of Horus, the one son who spent decades alone by their father's side. And to help his brother Sanguinius, Horus agrees to reveal nothing. It's really quite a powerful moment in the Horus-Sanguinius relationship, the even deeper forming of their bond as brothers, just ratcheting up the tragedy of their final encounter. And again for me, this moment really solidified why Horus was so universally trusted and praised by his fellow Primarchs, because he really would do anything for them. This was the guy who confronted Malcador at the very knowledge of one of his brother's statues being torn down. Despite the jealousy he felt for Russ upon meeting his first found brother, he came to cherish this bond. For all the greatness of many Primarchs, there really was a reason Horus was the best one for War Master. He didn't just excel in one regard, he exhibited the best of all of them. You really cannot underestimate the level of trust and conviction Horus was placing in Sanguinius by agreeing to keep his confidence. And Sanguinius was fully aware of just what he was asking his brother to agree to, keeping a secret from the Emperor of mankind. That's really saying something of the brother he was. So, we've had the Primarch, the glory of Lupercal by the Emperor's side. We've had the brother, willing to place a trust in a brother over anything and everything else. And finally, we have the man. For all the Primarch's attributes, we know at the end of the day, they have just as many flaws as us mere mortals. If not more so, they are the personalities of humanity pushed to the extreme, contained in bodies of near limitless power. Yet for all that, they are not infallible. Horus, as any man, suffered from his doubts. And while there's a billion examples of this after his fall as War Master, I think perhaps one of the most poignant comes from the novel Slaves to Darkness by John French. Here, we receive a fleeting glimpse of Horus on the eve of Ulanor, his pronouncement as War Master. On the night before the grand celebrations and parade of military might, Horus is walking alone through the camps, disguised from sight through some form of arcane technology, clearly lost to his thoughts on the moment about to come. And he is approached by none other than Malcador, obviously as everything with the Sigillite, by no coincidence. And the two together climb the vast stairway to the grand balcony, which looks out across the plains of Ulanor, the forces of the Imperium that stretch beyond the horizon. And it's revealed here, in the private conversation between the two, that the Emperor has already told Horus of his intentions, of his naming him as War Master. Horus reveals to his uncle that he's uncertain, clearly overwhelmed to some degree on just what this means, knowing that everything will change from this point onwards. And he actually asks Malcador, "Can I refuse?" So we really get to see the emotional conflict within Horus at such a grand moment. The natural doubts that anyone would have at such a defining and life-changing proposition. And maybe most telling, it doesn't appear to be the pressure of such a position that concerns him the most, which, considering he's a Primarch, does make sense. But it's how this will all affect his relationship with his brothers, his fellow Primarchs. The others will grow to accept it too. Malcador looked up from the view and gave a smile. As will you. Horus looked at him sharply. The Sigillite held the Primarch's gaze. Horus looked away after a moment. Perhaps. Malcador raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "It will change everything," Horus said at last. Now, firstly, how different this interaction is between Malcador and Horus compared to their argument in the last Council short story, where Malcador chides and humiliates the Primarch, which I actually think is supposed to take place before this, as it's before the Emperor and Dawn are upon Terra, and Horus is still the Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, and never referred to as the War Master. So this definitely makes it interesting to see the two having a genuine conversation here, in light of what may have transpired between them before. Admittedly, it is a little vague though, so perhaps it could be left to interpretation. However, regardless, in this conversation it's clear it's that change in dynamics with his brothers that is causing such a conflict within Horus, realizing that if he accepts this position, it's really a moment of no turning back. As he says himself, it will change everything. This is perhaps the last true glimpse of Horus before his ascension to the War Master position. The last glimpse of Horus before he was bearing the weight of that title. And you can see here the conflict within him, the small part of him that doesn't want anything to change. He muses after this what he would have done if the position had been offered to Rogel or Rabute, and he admits he would have wondered why it wasn't him, which is a very natural reaction. One he knows all of his brothers would most likely be thinking. And in knowing how all this turns out, you can't help but look back at Horus's doubts and conflicts in this moment with a genuine sense of sympathy, knowing that despite his elevation, despite the grandeur of being named War Master, the simple truth was he really didn't want anything to change. For me, it's all of these elements and dynamics that make up the tragedy of Horus. The glory and loyalty of the Primarch that was, one who perhaps shone the brightest, the brother who would do anything for his kin, even keeping the ultimate secrets in confidence, and the man who is simply no different to any of us, containing the same doubts and fears as us all. As we near his moment of triumph against the angel, the moment of tragedy, I think it's worth remembering just how far the War Master has fallen, how great the Lupercal of old truly was, why it was him who was named War Master, first amongst equals. But as always everyone, what do you think? As we near the climax of the Siege of Terra, do you find it easy to remember the Horus that was? Or have we seen the corrupted War Master for so long now that in truth he's really become the symbol of Horus, and the Lupercal of old a distant memory? That those memories of old are truly overshadowed by the tragedy that would come later. What moments of Horus's legacy stand out for you when you look back into the past? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.